Welcome to the Butterfly Empire Spirit Week. It is me, a butterfly queen, and welcome to the Butterfly Empire, where every day this week we are going to cover stories death by ghost. So, welcome back to Wednesday's recording. Today we're covering the Manson family murders. And once upon a time in Hollywood, the new film director, an actor, and a stuntman find themselves living next door to beautiful actress Sharon Tate. In the summer of 1969, and what none of the characters knows is that Tate and 5 others will soon be brutally murdered by members of the Manson family, the cult of the Charlie Manson that would become for many the ultimate symbol of the dark side of the 1960s. Born in 1934 to a teenage mother, Charles Manson's early childhood and young life was spent bouncing around between relatives and later in and out of institutions in the Midwest. In his early 20s, he married twice and fathered a son. Manson was considered so thoroughly institutionalized by authorities that upon his 1967 release from a California prison, he asked the warden if he could stay. Instead, Manson migrated to Berkeley and then San Francisco, cities that became flooded with young people looking to embark on a new way of life, an older figure among the crowd. He amassed a small group of followers, almost entirely women, and in 1968 headed along with several female followers to Los Angeles to pursue a music career. Having learned to play the guitar in person, Manson's tool of persuasion were the lax social codes of the late 1960s, in which runaway hippies mingle freely in Hollywood royalty, and his ability to tell others what they wanted to hear, both of which he paralyzed into a friendship with Dennis Wilson, the drummer for the Beach Boys. Though Manson met other music industry players and grew increasingly fixated on stardom, all while exercising greater and greater control over the group that came to be known as the Manson family. He was an investigative journalist. Jeff Gwynne put it in Manson, The Life and Times of Charles Manson, the wrong man in the right place at the right time. After the family members behind the August 1969 murders were apprehended, Manson was put on trial for murder along with them. He didn't do any of the actual killings, but prosecutors argued that the family did everything Manson ordered them to do, including murder one of California's largest stated prison inmates. Manson died in November 2017. Who were the followers known as the Manson family? In the public's imagination, the Manson girls, as they came to be known, loomed almost as large as Manson himself. Mostly young women in their late teens and early 20s. Manson family members were in the late 1960s, not especially unusual. White middle-class women all over the country were heading for cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, inspired by other hippies to turn on, tune in, and drop out. Manson used his female followers to lure other men to both join the group and to support it. It was several of the women that initially met Denise Wilson and brought Manson to his home. Manson and the family bounced around Los Angeles, eventually settling at Spahn Ranch, an old film and television set in western San Fernando Valley. At Spahn, Manson exercised total domination over the group. Members were reportedly forbidden from wearing eyeglasses or carrying money, and a member of the family, My Stories of Charles Manson, Life Inside His Cult, and the Darkness That Ended the 60s. Manson follower Diane Lake, just 14 when she met Manson, detailed long nights of lectures in which Manson introduced others at the ranch to take LSD and listen to him preach about the past, present, and future of humanity. Some of the family remained loyal to Manson even after he was sentenced to death, later converted to life in prison when the state of California overturned the use of the death penalty in 1975. One of Manson's earliest followers, Lynette "Squeaky" Fromm, attempted to assassinate President Gerald Ford. Her gun jammed and she was quickly felled by the Secret Service. Who was Helter Skelter? Prosecutor Vincent, in his exhaustive attempt to put together a motive for the family killings, landed on Manson's obsession with what they called Helter Skelter. Taken from the Beatles song of the same name, Manson told his followers the White Album was further evidence his theories about the end of the world were correct. Helter Skelter, and Manson's verbiage was the pensing rage war that would see thousands die and force the family disappear to underground caves. There they would wait until it was time for them to emerge and rule what was left of the world. While Manson initially foretold that the first crimes would be committed by African Americans against white, the desperate state of his affair in the summer of 1969, his musical aspiration had largely came to nothing and his Hollywood connections had died up, led him to shift focus and tell the family that they might have to begin helter-skelter themselves, committing savage crimes in upscale neighborhoods in an attempt to demonstrate to the African American how the violence should be carried out. In 1974, Beluso published Helter Skelter, the true story of the Manson murders, the first work examining the Manson family in the best-selling true crime book of all time. And now we're moving on to the Manson family victims. On the night of August 8, 1969, Manson family members Tex Watson, Patricia Cowinkwinkle, that's cute and adorable, I love that, Susan Atkins, and Linda Kasabi, who would later turn state's witness against each other, drove to Tate and Pulaski's house. The director was out of town working on a film. The 8 months pregnant Tate, who appeared in 1967 Valleys of the Dolls, and was considered one of most Hollywood's most promising up-and-comers, was relaxing at home with her friends, celebrity hairstyle Jay Subwing, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, and Folger's boyfriend Wojtek Frykowski. None of them had any tangible connection to the Manson or the family, other than him being physically in the house previously occupied by someone Manson knew, Terry Melcher. In Helter Skelter, Belushi writes that a witness from the prosecuting described a March 1969 day on which Manson came to the house looking for Melcher and found Tate on the porch instead. There could be no question that Charles Manson saw Sharon Tate and she him. Tate and her friends all died at the hands of Watson, Cowinkle, and Atkins, as did Stephen Parent, a teenage friend of the house caretaker who happened to be pulling out of the driveway as the killers arrived. The very next night, the same group of members plus Leslie Van Houten and Manson himself sent out to commit more murders. They drove to the house of the grocery business, executing Leonardo Labaki and his wife, Rosemary, in Los Feliz area of Los Angeles. Labaki was told unknown to the Manson family. Some of its members had reportedly been to a party in the neighborhood. According to Belowski, the Blackas were chosen at random after several hours of driving around upscale Los Angeles neighborhoods. Why does the mansion still loom so large? The brutal nature of the murders committed by the Manson family, in addition to the fact that some of the victims were celebrities, touched upon some of the deepest fears of American psyche. The idea that you might not be safe at home, for one, and the idea that even good girls are a few moves away from committing unspeakable crimes, they are cemented the idea in popular culture that free love movement of the 1960s wasn't free at all. It's a sentimental further exploding in Jeffrey McGill's Creepy Crawling, Charles Manson and the Many Lives of America's Most Infamous Family, in which Melick, professor in American Studies at the University of Massachusetts, Boston, examines the long-term cultural impact of the Manson family, and the White Album, as easily appearing in her eponymous collection, named the Beatles album. Joan Didion uses the murders to argue that the 60s had effectively ended the paranoia, she wrote, was fulfilled.